You know that feeling, right?
Ah.
Stuck in traffic, just crawling.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you're trying to get across a big, busy road with the kids, and it just feels impossible.
Yeah, or maybe you're on a bike and suddenly, whoops, no more bike lane, just gone.
Exactly. Or on the flip side, maybe you've been somewhere like a revamped downtown area, and the streets just felt calmer.
Slower, yeah, but nicer. Safer. You see more people out walking and maybe sitting at cafes.
Well, those experiences, the frustrating ones and the good ones, they're pretty much shaped by something called traffic engineering.
Right.
And today, we're doing a deep dive into the main guide for the people designing and managing all that, the Traffic Engineering Handbook from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE.
Yeah, it's kind of the Bible for the field. Traffic engineering fundamentally is about the planning, design, operation. Basically managing streets and highways.
But not just for cars.
No, and that's key. It's about how roads interact with everything, people walking, cycling, using transit, all of it. And this ITE handbook, it's been the go-to guide for ages.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack the latest version, the 7th edition, because apparently this one's not just a few tweaks, it's a big shift in thinking.
It really is a significant evolution.
So we want to figure out what's changed. Why is the thinking shifting? And crucially, why does this matter to you? You know, just living your life trying to get around. What makes this edition important? Let's dig in.
Okay, so to really get the change, it helps to look back a bit. The very first edition, 1941.
Wow, okay. Different era.
Totally different. Cars were booming, and the main job was just build roads.
Yeah.
Get the cars moving. Capacity was king. How many cars, how fast.
Right, the old congestion, add a lane approach. We've all seen that.
And we've also seen it often doesn't really work long term. You build more roads, you often should get more traffic.
Reduce demand, yeah.
Exactly. So the field started shifting earlier, thinking about managing demand, not just supply, influencing how and when people travel.
Okay, so that was already happening. What's so different now in the 7th edition?
Well, that evolution has really kicked into high gear. The thinking now is much broader. It's not just about car capacity or even just managing car demand.
It's about
looking at a whole range of options.
Yeah.
Designing and operating things for the safe, efficient movement of everyone, all users, whatever mode they're using.
Everyone meaning pedestrians, bikes, transit, cars.
Delivery trucks, emergency vehicles, people with disabilities, older people, kids.
Yes.
And doing it in a way that's context sensitive.
Context sensitive. So like a downtown street shouldn't be designed like a highway.
Precisely. That's a huge emphasis now, tailoring the design to the place. So for an urban street, the handbook explicitly talks about designing for slower speeds.
Slower speeds? That sounds counterintuitive for traffic engineering.
Well, yes and no. Slower speeds are safer, especially for people walking or biking. They make street-level businesses work better. They contribute to, like, the economic vibe of a place.
Okay, so the street isn't just a pipe for cars, it's a place.
Exactly. A public space with multiple jobs. And this edition really leans into that. It's the handbook itself calls it a significant departure from the old ways.
A significant departure. So what's the new core idea?
The core principle is that traffic engineering is a tool to meet broader societal needs. Not just moving cars efficiently, but facilitating safe and efficient movement for all road users.
All road users. That's a phrase that keeps coming up.
It's deliberate. The handbook is making a real effort to integrate everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, drivers, commercial vehicles, all ages, all abilities. It's acknowledging that maybe past practices over-focused on one group.
Okay, trying to balance things out. How do they frame this bigger picture? What are these broader needs?
They explicitly bring in concepts like, well, context-sensitive solutions we mentioned, but also resiliency.
Resiliency, like bouncing back after a storm or something.
Yeah, exactly. And environmental sensitivity, making sure the system's reliable, sustainability. These bigger picture goals are now woven in. It's not just about traffic flow anymore.
And you mentioned performance-based design. How does that fit in?
That's a really key mechanism for this shift. Performance-based design sounds technical, but the idea is pretty straightforward.
Okay, break it down for us.
Instead of just designing to meet a set standard, like, say, a minimum lane width or a certain level of service just for cars.
Which is often about how little delay cars experience.
Right. Instead of just that, you focus on the outcomes you actually want. You measure performance before, during, after a project. And you make decisions based on actual costs and, importantly, wider benefits.
Wider benefits like?
Well, not just less congestion or fewer crashes, although those are important, but maybe things like better public health because more people feel safe walking. or increase business activity,
Right.
or lower emissions. It's about measuring what matters to the community.
So it's less about ticking design boxes and more about, did this project actually achieve our goals?
Precisely. And the handbook has this fascinating idea. It suggests engineers using this approach can act almost like financial advisors for mobility investments.
Financial advisors. How so?
By using performance data, they can help cities and regions make smarter strategic investments, spending money not just to move cars faster, but to build genuinely more sustainable, resilient, livable communities. It elevates the whole role.
Wow, okay. That is a different way of thinking about a traffic engineer. So this new philosophy, this broader vision, how is the actual handbook, like the book itself, organized to reflect that? Did they just add some chapters on bikes?
No, much more fundamental than that. The whole structure changed. They moved away from traditional chapters and organized it into 4 functional content areas.
Functional content areas. Why do that? What does that achieve?
The idea is to group topics based on what engineers actually do, the tasks, the roles. This structure is meant to push a more concurrent, multimodal, multi-use approach.
Concurrent, multimodal, multi-use.
So thinking about everything at the same time right from the start. Exactly. Not cars first, then maybe squeeze in a sidewalk later if there's budget. It's trying to break down that old layered way of thinking. The goal is integration, harmonization, right from the planning stage through design and operation.
Okay, so what kind of stuff is in these functional areas? Give us a flavor.
Sure, there's foundational stuff, the math, the science, human factors, safety basics, how to collect and analyze data. Then there are areas focused on specific environments, like uninterrupted flow think freeways, and interrupted flow urban streets, intersections. But crucially, there are whole areas dedicated to things like complete streets.
Designing for everyone.
Right. Access management, how driveways and side streets connect, traffic calming, even parking. These are integrated now, not separate little topics. Plus operational things, work zones, handling emergencies, special events.
This is really interesting. So what happens to big topics that used to be almost their own fields, like intelligent transportation systems, ITS, or traffic signals, or even safety itself? Are they just gone?
Not gone at all, but they're not sitting in their own isolated chapters anymore. They're woven into those functional areas wherever they're most relevant to the task at hand.
Okay, can you give an example? Safety. How is that integrated?
Good example. So the handbook talks about safety concepts, like the difference between designing to standards that's nominal safety and what the actual crash history tells you, substantive safety.
Okay.
The basic principles, like human factors influencing safety, are in a foundational section. The statistical tools for analyzing crash data, also foundational. How to actually do a safety study, covered there too. But then the critical part is how you apply these safety ideas.
Right.
That happens in the sections dealing with specific facility types, designing a rural highway, operating an urban intersection, managing access points, implementing traffic calming. Safety isn't just theory, it's embedded in the practice.
That makes a lot of sense. Apply the principles where you need them. What about traffic signals? That always felt like a very distinct, complex topic.
Still is complex. But again, the application is now presented contextually. So if you're talking about signals used for ramp metering on freeways, that's discussed in the uninterrupted flow area.
Okay.
The basic principles of signal control for a regular city street with bikes and pedestrians, that's in the interrupted flow or multimodal sections. How signals specifically help make a complete street work for everyone, discussed in that context. It follows the engineer's workflow.
And what about communication? Like talking to the public about a project, that seems vital, but maybe used to be handled separately.
Exactly. Community engagement isn't just one chapter you read and forget. It pops up wherever it's crucial.
Such as?
Well, when the handbook discusses how to mitigate the traffic impacts of a new development, it talks about engaging the community. When it covers implementing tricky things like access management or traffic calming, communication strategies are right there. Even for scheduling work zones or planning for emergencies, public involvement is integrated into that specific task guidance.
So the big idea is safety, signals, ITS, communication. They aren't separate boxes to check. They're all interconnected parts of the system.
Precisely. You have to consider them holistically, together, based on the specific situation, the context. That's the reality of the job, and the handbook now reflects that messy interconnectedness.
Okay, this sounds incredibly thorough, very forward-looking, but Does it create any difficulties? The source mentioned educators may be finding it tricky.
Yeah, it does acknowledge that this new integrated structure could be challenging, especially for professors used to teaching from the old chapter-based format. Redesigning courses takes effort.
Sure.
But interestingly, the handbook frames it more as an opportunity.
An opportunity how?
An opportunity for universities to really embrace this holistic thinking, to train the next generation of traffic engineers differently right from the start, to produce, as the source puts it, holistic traffic engineering practitioners of the 21st century.
So a chance to update the training to match the new practice.
Exactly. A chance to bake in this integrated, multimodal, context-sensitive thinking from day one.
Okay, let's pull back from the handbook itself. Why does all this inside baseball about how engineers organize their guide matter to, you listening right now, someone just trying to get around town?
This is the crucial connection. Because the ideas, the priorities, the methods in this book, they directly shape the world outside your front door. The engineers designing your streets, your intersections, your bike lanes, your sidewalks, this is their primary reference.
So this shift in thinking within the profession translates directly into changes on the ground.
Absolutely. It influences decisions about your safety, the travel choices available to you, whether you can comfortably walk or bike, or whether driving feels like the only option. It affects the whole character of your community.
It's the difference between designing primarily for car throughput
and designing places for people, places that are safe, accessible, maybe even enjoyable for everyone, regardless of how they're moving. This isn't just theory, it's the blueprint.
So when you see maybe a new protected bike lane appear, or traffic signals retimed to give walkers more time,
or maybe even a speed limit lowered on a busy neighborhood street, those are tangible results of this evolving way of thinking within the profession, guided by resources like this updated handbook.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be that the 7th edition of the IT Traffic Engineering Handbook isn't just a refresh. It's signaling a real paradigm shift.
Yeah, a fundamental move away from the old car-first model towards something genuinely multimodal, context-aware, and focused on performance, on achieving broader goals for society.
It's still the essential guide for the pros, obviously.
Absolutely vital. But it's also, for the rest of us, a kind of window into how the future of our streets and communities is being planned and designed towards more integrated, more human-focused transportation.
So here's something to think about. As the people designing our transportation systems embrace this wider, more integrated approach, how might the places you live, work, and move through actually start to change? Will they feel safer, more accessible, more livable, maybe, for everyone? Keep an eye out. You might start seeing these principles playing out on your own streets.